I wanted to touch on one point. You
Yeah.
know, you so this is applicable to anyone in a large company, in a large enterprise. They're sort of grown up, attuned to processes that were born in a different environment in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they're still trying to you know figure out how to maneuver this giant oil tanker. And then here's Mark Suster at Andreessen saying, well, that's just a bunch of BS. And they're like, well, no, we're an oil tanker. Wait, we can't. And so how does, you've been in the enterprise, you've seen entrepreneurs penetrate on enterprises, so you have a very unique vantage point. How, if you're in the enterprise, or you're an entrepreneur trying to sell to an oil tanker, um, what has worked? Like, how do you even begin to think about it?
I think an advantage that I have in thinking about entrepreneurship is that I spent nearly a decade consulting to advising and building systems for large corporates. So I understand a little bit more about how decisions get made and why decisions get made. I think too many startup entrepreneurs tend to be dismissive of big corporates, and I think that's a mistake. I think they tend to be dismissive of people who work at large corporations. That's also a mistake. Um, so there are reasons why a 25-person company is going to be free-formed and not have deeply embedded processes. And there's reasons why a 20,000-person organization needs to, you know, needs to have policies and procedures, and everybody can't be free-formed. And so understanding that matters, understanding what it takes to drive change, that change is driven by people, and that you need people who want to define themselves by adopting new technology, by changing the way operations work, and are willing to drive through change against resistance that naturally exists within the system. So you need, whether you call those executive sponsors or whether you call that a champion, my terminology is I call it an egg breaker. Someone, the old saying is you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. But people who are willing to go fight for change. And unless you find someone like that, your software's less likely to be adopted. So I like to think holistically about technology, people, processes, system, approval, and not in a bad light. These things exist for a reason. Like, how could a 20,000 person organization exist if there's no policy or rules and anyone was just free to do anything? And so I think it's healthy. And, when I sold my company to Salesforce, my team thought they all wanted to leave right away. And I said to them, like, stay for 2 to 3 years. You're going to learn so much. Like, I always say this about tech. Okay. So if I take the smartest tech kid from Indiana here in the US, or the smartest tech person in Hyderabad, they're at no disadvantage. They're no less smart than the smartest person in Silicon Valley. But if you're at a tech firm in Silicon Valley and you're working at Facebook or Google, you work in, let's say, Seattle at Amazon, and you've operated at scale, you just know things about how a large corpus of data, how people operate and make decisions, and what tends to drive adoption of new products, because you have data that other people don't have. So for me, getting access to and understanding how big companies work, how large data sets work, how consumers behave, it's a superpower. So I encourage them to stay. Most of them stayed 5 years. I sold in March of 2007, and there are still people there to this day at Salesforce.
Yeah, it's amazing.